I just want to give a couple people, some time to join in. All right, everybody, we're going to get rolling right at about time. My name is Matt Boris. I'm one of the area vice presidents here at Zerto. We did have a little bit of a technical issue where Bob Buchanan right now is unable to log in. Hopefully he can join later in the session. But, we're going to have a combination, discussion really here. What is business resilience with DRaaS? What is it? Why does it matter? And we're going to walk through that for probably about the next 35 or so minutes. I want to go over, a couple reminders. We are recording this session. We're going to be sharing it afterwards for anyone that is either on or anyone that wants to share it with some coworkers. Obviously, if you have some questions or you want to hear from you, please, send them to the chat panel, to the Q&A. We'll get them answered either in real time if we can, or at the end of the session, I'll take them and do my best to handle those. So we do thank you for joining. Want to talk a minute about really what Cox Business Solutions is, if you guys are not familiar with what they've offered. But really, it's powered by Rapid Scale, founded in 2008, and then Rapid Scale focused really on, for the last 12 years, on what is hybrid managed solutions from all the way from the SMB up to the enterprise market. And we'll talk about some of the different customers and different use cases in there. Rapid Scale was, acquired by Cox Business about 2 years ago. But really, it's really been a stability-born business. And I think the important thing to see here is, the NPS score of 78 is really incredibly high. These net promoter scores are very difficult and really rate what your experience is with a vendor. And when you're talking about a managed service, which is really critical here, that NPS is even more important. So I won't go line by line, but you can see really, really focus on all these different application delivery options that are out there. And we'll take some of your questions around, what if you have specifics on it. So really what we have here is a really good partnership between Zerto and Cox. The idea is that we can give you really true IT resilience through a managed service. We're going to talk about what IT resilience really means. We're going to talk even a little bit what disaster recovery and business continuity means for those that are not totally aware of it. But Cox is one of those really important partners for us here at Zerto that's able to deliver our software, package it together with some really incredible managed service and bring that and make it a lot easier for the end users out there. So what we're seeing and where we're going to start this discussion is more and more things in the news. I think a lot of us on this call probably either experienced personally the Garmin outage that existed or saw it in the news. They paid $10 million because they had a cyber attack, and the impact was far greater than that. There are people who are no longer going to do business with them. There are people who had issues with their software, taking them weeks and really potentially longer to recover to these financial pieces. And this used to be a once in a long time thing you'd see in the news. Now it happens over and over again. I mean, I myself have a Garmin watch. I bike ride and I run, and it took me a little while to figure out why it wasn't working. And this, in the end, is what it is. Does it mean I'm going to walk away from Garmin tomorrow? Probably not. But it does make me wonder about the next purchase I'm going to make, which is what you as want to avoid for your customers. So for the longest time, really what DR was in the event of a true natural disaster. Hey, we had a hurricane, we had a tornado, my data center went completely dark, something along those lines. What we've really seen is major changes to the point where everything happens to people. And these are some of the different examples that are out there, but the most common one we talked about was a little bit on the cybercrime side. We see human error happen all the time, but really there are things that are even proactive that we do now. You do patch upgrades, you have issues where you have to take downtime to do an upgrade or change your environment. 10 or 20 years ago, you'd send an email and you'd say, I'm going to take the system down, and people would say, okay, I'm not going to work at this time of day. That's sort of no longer, available to most of the customers we see. It's really an always-on experience. You don't have a lot of downtime. And the important stat that I bring out here is that 33% of companies declared something that they called a major disaster in the past 5 years. And that number keeps going up. It goes up every year, where it used to be 50%, then 20, now we're at 33. More companies have these issues and outages, and it's a matter of how do you respond to these and how do you resume from these. So along with the fact that we don't have downtime of it, anymore, we don't have pockets where you can say, I want to be out for hours, there is the added complexity, and we have to embrace this change. And this change really used to be servers that we were worried about, used to be very monolithic, not, I go into my server room, that's what I worry about, I got to make sure everything's functional. Now, as we all know, in the COVID world, even more than ever before, everyone's working from home. You have endpoint devices, laptops, iOS devices, Android devices, Surfaces, tablets, you name it. And then in conjunction with that, it's no longer your four walls. It could be the public cloud, or it could be hybrid cloud. Lots of different areas that you have to be able to safeguard all of your data. So pretty important and a cultural change to think about when you're talking about these DR events or these issues that are happening out there is it's sort of become well known that prevention isn't the only answer. You can't have an expectation that you're actually going to prevent a problem from always happening. You can do the right things, you can buy the right infrastructure, you can, personnel be trained in the right ways to handle things, all very important aspects of what you're trying to get done. But at the same time, when something does go wrong, how are you going to survive? How are you going to move on? And I've said it 2 or 3 times, and it's a word I do use often. How are you going to resume your operations quickly and effectively? And that's the other aspect that many people think about. They work on prevention, and they say, well, if something gets bad, I'll figure it out at the time. It's very difficult to actually be figuring things out in that kind of high stress situation. You want to make it as easy and repeatable, as possible. So many of you may know what this really is that we're talking about. It's really business continuity and disaster recovery. The ability to continue to operate and run in the event of a problem. Problem could be small, problem could be big. We'll walk you through some different options around what that looks like and how to recover from that. So 2 key concepts that are really important to understand, really the recovery point objective, common terminology in the disaster recovery world, but if you're not used to this, you'll have no idea what it is, which is really what's the maximum amount of time that you're okay to have data loss? Meaning, are you okay having a day's worth of data loss? Some customers have told us that they are, but that's changing through history. That was the traditional model. I would take a nightly backup. Maybe if something went wrong, I would recover something from a tape from the day before, and I would be okay with a day's loss. That was probably 10 or 20 years ago. Now it becomes, is 4 hours okay? Am I okay losing the last 4 hours of my customer orders or the last 4 hours of somebody inputting data into the system? That's a business decision. It's usually not an IT decision. That's an executive decision on what's their appetite for this. Just as important is the RTO. How long is it going to take you to actually restore that operation? So maybe you lost 1 day's worth of data, but if you had to recall tapes from off-site, insert them, recover the data, make sure it's the right data, that might take you another day, might take you 2 days. So really, you've actually had, been out for 3 days. And is that something you're okay with? Once again, most customers really not okay with that. Most customers are down into the hours and the minutes. And that becomes a question of what is the business appetite for lost revenue, lost productivity, lost, wages, and even potentially what does it look like out in the garment situation, which is your brand? What are people going to think about you after that? So one of the examples that we use quite often is this, it follows along those RPO and RTOs and what the real impact looks like. Talked about daily backups. This customer, $100 million in annual revenue. They're okay with a day's worth of downtime. They're okay with a day to recover. That impact is over $821,000 to their business. Pretty substantial when you're looking at some kind of technology and solutions to mitigate it against that. The ROI is pretty compelling. So if you bring it down a level and say, okay, I'm using some kind of snapshot-based technology for my customers that are on-prem today, going between different systems in their own data centers, they're looking at a 4-hour RPO and a 4-hour ability to be operational on an RTO, still almost $137,000 of impact. And for those of you on the phone, maybe your business is smaller or bigger, but you can figure out the numbers and say, well, if I was, a $10 million company and I lost and I lost over an $83,000 or I lost $15,000, still very impactful to your business. The Zerto virtual replication really changes the game. We've been around for over a decade. The concept being that we're going to give you these really low RPOs and really low RTOs. And you can see we're talking seconds and minutes here. And that's those numbers we're giving you are real world, what our customers see. We do have some customers that are faster than that, but what you're seeing on the screen for 20 seconds and 15 minutes is really accurate and what you'd expect to see. But the economic impact, of losing a few $1,000s versus, upwards of $1 million, pretty impactful and pretty important when you're trying to figure out what do my outages look like, what do they mean, how can I handle them? If we circle back sort of to the ransomware piece and what we saw, this stat, and there's going to be a couple others as I build the slide out, the first stat in the bottom right is the one that really is pretty amazing, which is more than half the companies that we see out there are out of business within 6 months of a cyber attack. And that's because most of the small businesses, small, medium businesses, are not prepared for it, and it becomes a brand recognition issue, and you just have to, it takes so long to recover from building your infrastructure back up, recovering the data, dealing with the negative press, all those kind of things that go there. So while 5 years ago, ransomware was something that used to scare people and we used to hear about it once in a while, it is in the news almost every day now in every industry. And unfortunately, it's something that we have to learn to mitigate and work through. Excuse me. And the attacks just keep coming. So that's why the question to me becomes, it really becomes, how are you going to handle prevention and how are you going to handle the recovery? And that's the important part that we're focused on. So this is meant as it's the life that we're living in now. Disruptions are the norm because of what we're trying to accomplish and what technology means for us. I think it's fairly impossible to think that there won't be some kind of event at your company or a company you do business with based on what we know. Just so many different devices, so many different dependencies, the technology changing so often, the stresses we put on the system. So it's no longer, like I said, it's no longer when I started in this industry, okay, we'll be fine unless we have a hurricane come up the East Coast, then we got to be ready for that. These events are random. These events don't happen with a lot of knowledge ahead of time. So that's where Zerto and Cox are trying to move away from just traditional DR. I have a problem, let me figure out a way to recover, and move to IT resilience. not a term that everyone probably understands or knows. IT resilience really for us means the ability to build a system and be ready for those kind of problems. Now, it's also important to understand that in conjunction with the ability to be ready, it's getting ahead of it so that when a problem happens, you don't have to think of 5 or 10 or 15 steps to get done. That's already been all done through the orchestration within the tool set. So if you know you have a problem, and we'll walk you through this, it's a few different mouse clicks or a phone call in conjunction with Cox, and things happen automatically without a lot of, how do I make this happen? Oh, I have to remember this, or I've got to call this guy, I have to script that. So it's all about, being able to make sure your services are online. So build this slide out for 1 second. Pretty important to think about is that the traditional model that's been out there for a long time, and many of you may be using this, is I've got multiple data centers, and you might have 2, maybe you have 3, and you are actually replicating from one data center to another. And in doing that, it works. There's nothing to say that's a bad choice. However, it is not proven to be as flexible as what we're going to talk about in a moment. It usually means you're actually locked into a lot of infrastructure costs. You have to buy more servers, you have to buy networking gear, you have to buy storage, you have to put that all in both data centers. It's a high CapEx cost. You have to refresh it every so often, whether it's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. You're also paying obviously for cooling and power and real estate in some ways, whether you're leasing, whether you own it. So it's one of those things where you're sort of locked into this scenario. What disaster recovery as a service really gives you is a lot more flexibility, which is you're paying for what you need. How many systems are you trying to replicate? How many are mission critical? How many are not? What are the kind of areas that you need? And all those services are taken care of by someone like Cox, which is they handle all of the managed services. There is no, okay, how many employees do I need? When are they going to get over there? Do I have to get them over to test things? It's all very predictable, and it's a lower OpEx cost. You're not worried about, oh, do I have to upgrade this switch? Do I have to upgrade this piece of gear? There is nothing to that, which is one of the reasons that we've seen this model really take off, and it's even just enhanced itself even more in the world of COVID, unfortunately, because with COVID, people can't get access to those in person to as many locations. You can't upgrade as quickly. That becomes much more of a concern for the provider like Cox, and their job is to make this easy for you, and they've built in these services to handle all of this. So wanted to walk through really 2 different scenarios and customers we have, one on the high side and one on the smaller side, to just give you guys a little background here. So United Airlines, everyone's very familiar with them, one of the largest airlines in the world. They're a very large consumption user of Zerto. They've been using it for about 3 years now. If any of us, if you remember, nearly 3 years ago, United had a problem with their booking system in the middle of the day. It was in the summer of 17. They were unable to actually handle bookings, and that obviously cost them money. That was after that was one of the initial implementations of Zerto. And what it allows them to do is to be able to ensure, the example I always tell customers is, if you try and click on something and you want to buy something, if you click on it again, there are a lot of times that's Zerto in the background providing the ability for that customer to make that transaction because you've used Zerto to handle the problem that was on the back side of it. We'll walk through a couple more pieces of it. Pretty critical for United is the idea that, and you can see on the bottom bullet, they were the traditional multi-data center customer, and they wanted to go to Microsoft Azure in their scenario as a target. So allowing them the flexibility to move out of a data center and into another option. And they used that with Zerto, and it gave them a lot more flexibility in the OpEx cost that we're talking about. So big customer, very happy. You can see they've got lots of VMs that they're using, that they're successfully testing, making sure their applications are running. We currently protect their reservation system. We also protect their maintenance system, and the maintenance system has been pretty critical because if they can't actually have their maintenance system and schedule running, then planes cannot move because they have to clear a maintenance schedule in order to stay in the air. Now, on the other side of the equation, because we go, candidly, it doesn't matter to me whether you're a customer that has 10 virtual machines or 10,000, Zerto is going to help you protect across all of those. So Adams Bank and Trust really had some issues where they were where they had a couple ransomware attacks. It wasn't public. All the customers knew was that there were outages at the bank, and it was hurting their brand. Couldn't access it, as you can see, for 24 hours, and they had actual data loss. They had significant data loss, and it really just the whole experience, was causing a problem. So the biggest piece for them, and you can see it in the quote at the bottom, and a lot of customers, use it, which is we're TiVo for ransomware or we're DVR for data. And I think it's a really good analogy, which is the idea that if it's noon today and you had a problem and you want to go back to 11:59 and 50 seconds, you can do that. If if it's noon today and you say, hey, we didn't realize it, but there's been a problem going on for a half an hour, for whatever reason the customer didn't realize it, you can go back to 11:30 in the morning as well. It's not just a one option kind of piece, and we'll take a look at that a couple slides ahead of time. But big change for this customer was the idea that going from 24 hours of data loss to seconds, and for them their time to recovery became, I can lose 5 or 10 seconds worth of data, I'll be operational within an hour, and that's a service level agreement that the business is okay accepting in the event we do have a real problem. So this next slide gives you an idea of what the Zerto interface looks like. Our partners like Cox often make some changes to this interface through their portal to make it even easier based upon your customer requirements. This is what our standard one looks like. And what I really want to point out is just a couple key things, which is this particular customer, you can see in the middle of the screen, they're protecting 124 virtual machines and 51 terabytes of data. We talked about the recovery point objectives, customers, having 24 hours and down to 4 hours. This customer is 7 seconds. So 7 seconds of potential data loss in the event of a real problem in the environment. So if a customer said, hey, I have a problem, I need to recover, they would generally, if you were an end user managing your own systems, you would go in, you would hit in the bottom right-hand corner, you'd hit the failover button, basically saying, I have a disaster. When you click this live button, it goes red to say, hey, this is a pretty big deal. Are you sure you want to do this? And then you say, okay, I'm going to click failover. I'm going to then pick which systems. And the slide won't depict it well, and that's okay. But important for everyone to understand in the disaster recovery world is you may have a problem with a single file. Maybe it's your CEO was working on a file for the past 2 days and he accidentally deleted it, or he's working and he wants the most recent copy. You can go back and recover that file from 10 seconds ago or 20 seconds ago. Maybe it's a virtual machine that had a corruption event or some update didn't apply correctly. You can recover once again that single virtual machine. Or the next level of what I would call problem is an application failed. Someone's ordering system failed, which consists of actually a database, an index server, some kind of front end server, and maybe something else. 4 different servers together. Well, you could recover those 4 servers. Or the worst case scenario, true natural disaster, true data center problem, where you need to recover everything. So the software and technology allows you to say what application, file, or system do I need to recover? And then you say, do I want my latest one, which is what it automatically goes to, which might be 7 seconds ago? Or do I actually want to go back earlier? Do I want to go back, 2 hours ago? Is that the right, piece? And at that point, you start the failover. We won't walk through, all of that behind it. When that happens, all the automation is going on in the background so that you don't have to worry about it. And that's sort of what I talked about at the beginning of this call, was you don't want to be worrying about this in a high stress situation. The phone rings, there's a problem, you need to recover. What our goal and our partnership with Cox is to make this as easy and seamless as possible. So you're not scratching your head going, did we make that change? What about that IP address? What about that setting? All of that automation has already been done, configured, and set up. So when you hit that last button, everything works. And I won't spend a ton of time on this because this is what I was sort of walking through with you on the last slide. Just the whole concept of real flexibility, whether you need a single file, upwards of an entire site, whether you want to recover from 10 seconds ago, or whether you want to recover, 2 hours ago, or even yesterday. A lot of flexibility built into the product and into the technology to give you total protection on what you need. So that was about 30 minutes, close to it, of walking through, high level how our partnership and the technology works. But these are some of the key questions that we always ask when we're talking to our clients, which is, most of our customers have some kind of SLA back to their business. It may not be a hard-lined SLA of, if I don't hit this, something bad happens, but there's usually an agreement of, I can recover in whatever time frame. So the question is, can you do it? Can you repeat it? Can you test it? Can you actually do a test against this that's non-disruptive? Very important for our customers is, we want you to be able to test what's going on and how it works on Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon, as opposed to saying, I got to bring everything down on Friday at 8 p.m. and tell everyone not to log in, and it'll be a real big, imposition and impact. So that's pretty important to us. And then, can you change your SLAs? Can you basically tell your customers and your end users, hey, if this is a critical system, I'll get it back operational in an hour. If it's a test system, it'll be 4 hours, and if it's something else, maybe it's 24 hours. And then the other item that we didn't really talk about, but a pretty important question to think about, is what happens after it's over? Can you fail back? So you have a data center today in one location, you have a data center in another location, you have a problem, you fail over to the second data center, that's great. You're able to recover and run your application or your system. How do you bring it back to the primary data center when things are operational? Really, really fairly important from just a methodology and how you run your business. And as we wrap things up, I think it's important to understand, really what Cox Business is offering for you guys is taking away a lot of the pieces that are inherently really hard to do because with all of their manpower and all of their history. They can understand and take a look at what your IT landscape looks like. Those run books, which are really generally hard to build if you don't have a ton of experience in doing them, these guys do it really well. Obviously, they're able to run the tests. They're able to give you the fully managed solution, which is where they literally manage everything for you and take it all off your plate, or they co-manage it with you, which gives you guys, as an end user and a customer, flexibility to say, I want to be involved in some of these aspects. I want to make some of these decisions, some of these configurations, but I do need help with it. And really important, as I move into this last slide, I think it's incredibly important to understand that we live in a world where things are changing, if not by the month or the week, sometimes by the day now. And that flexibility is inherent with what Cox is offering. It's not I've made a decision to go with Cox and Zerto. I can only do work with them, and I can only go to their data center, and I can only use their technology. A lot of flexibility here to say, if I have to go to other clouds, if I have to do other technologies, you can do it and configure it with us. With that, I don't know from a chat perspective if the questions have been answered because I haven't been able to see them. But if we want to open it, I can answer any Zerto specific questions.
Hey, Matt. And we also have Chris Pierdomenici on from our team to help out with some questions since we weren't able to get back Bob on the audio.
That's perfect.
Do have a bunch of questions coming in, so we'll just use the next 15 minutes to go through them. So the first, so creating that many recovery points wouldn't consume all my bandwidth? That's the first question.
I had a real hard time hearing you there, Summer. I'm sorry.
Does creating that many recovery points not consume all my bandwidth?
Based on the way that the Zerto technology does it, we are doing basically compression across the wire, and we're only doing changes, so we do not see much bandwidth consumption at all. We have a tool to analyze it as well.
Awesome. And next up, what are the benefits for smaller businesses that are accustomed to using other backups? Will I save time in recovering my data?
Really good question. You'll absolutely save time. There's a couple different benefits, and I think it matters on what's important to the business, which is it gives you the granularity to say, I want to go back to almost any point in time from 5 seconds to 5 hours ago. It also gives you the flexibility of saying, I want to recover files, systems, servers, or the entire site. And it also removes what I would consider the complexity of trying to recover. Usually, most of my small business customers have a lot of different varying parts. They have a backup solution. They may have a hardware solution like a tape provider, things like that. This can remove a couple different components and become sort of the one solution for you. So it just depends on what you're trying to solve and what your appetite for downtime is.
Excellent. And Chris, feel free to just chime in if you want to add anything to any of these.
Yeah, actually, I would kind of piggyback on what Matt said. Is not only is it going to save you time from a basic DR perspective, but you can also look at this holistically from a business sense and say, what else can I benefit from using this? And one of the great aspects of what the Zerto solution provides is going beyond your DR needs, looking at, okay, I have, 5 different data centers. I'm looking to start migrating some of that hardware to the cloud. You can use Zerto as a way to, once you've replicated your data from a DR perspective and those VMs and everything else, you can start using that as your migration path to getting some of those data centers to the cloud.
Excellent. I'm just going to keep going, you guys. So this person says, I'm nervous about ransomware. Would I be able to avoid paying a ransom to hackers? Zerto.
Tough question to answer because I can't give a business discussion about avoiding it. But in general, what I would say is this: if there's ransomware in the environment, Zerto gives you the ability to roll back before the environment, before that happened. So if it happened at noon, you could go back to 11:55. Your systems will be unlocked and open, and you can resume operations again. But in the era of true transparency, the question would be, how did they get into your environment, and how do you prevent them from getting into your environment again? So the short answer is yes, we can absolutely help you in that, but I'm afraid it could happen again, and that's leads to another discussion. Chris, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I would say that's a very valid response to the concern is. I would say from a top level perspective, it's going to help you in the very near term be able to, for lack of a better way to describe it, survive the attack. Because you can restore systems, or at the absolute worst case scenario where you're restoring systems, say in the cloud, to give you that bridge between getting those critical operations back up and running, and then you can then be using that time where you're bringing those systems back up to assess, where that attack in your ecosystem occurred, so that hopefully you can isolate it, lock it down, and then fail back to that environment when it's appropriate to do so.
Yep.
Great. So this person's asking, so Cox and RapidScale can actually help me validate my plan. They can assist us in getting this set up and managed.
Definitely. We have our certified engineers who can help you with a soup to nuts solution, starting from assessing what your environment is, understanding what your DR needs and goals are, mapping out a strategy for what is appropriate to address those DR needs, and then move along from there to building that runbook, helping you execute the tests that you might need to do that you may perhaps not have done with some of whatever you might have done for DR in the past, and evaluate your DR strategy on an ongoing basis. So as you do those tests and you're accruing your data of understanding what's working, what's not working, help you adjust that strategy as you go. And in the event you do have a downtime event, our engineers would be 100% available to you 24/7 to help you work through that, crisis as it manifests itself.
Awesome. Does Zerto offer file level restore?
Yes, they do. Yes, we can go to the individual file level and recover the same way we do a virtual machine or a set of virtual machines or a site. Are there more?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute there. The next one is justifying buying 2 sets of hardware every few years is really hard right now. How do you subscribe to this service?
I'll leave that to Chris, I think. I mean, it sounds like the question is instead of buying the 2 sets of hardware, how do you subscribe to something like the Cox DRaaS services? I think what the question is.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to understand the question. That's kind of a broad question where the easy answer is, in a manner of speaking, it does help you avoid having to buy that fully duplicated set of equipment that you would have to, in the sense of, like an off-site location with physical hardware. To a degree, it's going to help replace some of that, or potentially even more or less all of that. But I would caveat that by saying it's going to be very dependent upon what your needs are and what's appropriate for, that DR strategy that you might want to be building, because you may have certain data, certain servers, etc., that you may have to still maintain some sort of a physical presence for that backed up and retained data.
Yep.
All right. What does a bare metal restore look like?
Zerto doesn't do complete bare metal restore. I mean, we have to have a virtual machine in order to run. Chris, I'm sure there's some options that exist through Cox that can do that.
Yeah, that's a good question. There are we do have options that would be applicable to that. That we could help you explore, and it's kind of a challenge to answer that without understanding more about what the needs are. Because I hesitate to just throw a solution off the top of my head, sort of thing. But the answer to the question is yes, we can certainly assist you with that bare metal restore, and answer that more intelligently by understanding what your specific needs are with that bare metal restore.
Agreed. I get it.
Because it could be, X number of servers. It could be, you know, a variety of different situations that I can think of off the top of my head that I don't want to speak off the cuff in answering that beyond saying yes, that we can assist that in one capacity or another.
Awesome. Another person asked, how have some of your customers justified the resources spent on cloud-based disaster recovery?
I think in general, it's not always a positive ROI, but many times it is, for the exact reason that the earlier person mentioned. The question about trying to keep up 2 data centers can be very expensive, cost around it. It becomes a cost of analysis of what's it going to look like in the cloud. And it depends, obviously, if you're talking public cloud, like an Amazon or an AWS, which has some different parameters, or something like what Cox can offer, which is really the managed solution. So the short answer to it is most of my customers can see an ROI, because what they're doing today is heavy lift after heavy lift of new hardware, new software, new infrastructure, and real estate costs. And going to one of these solutions is usually it's faster, it's more agile, it's more flexible, but B, it's also more cost effective.
Awesome. Does it come with archival service for data retention?
Yes, it does. But there's the reason I hesitated is similar to what Chris was thinking earlier. There's a couple different ways to answer that, which is Zerto has some pieces in it where we offer what we call long-term retention, and long-term retention to me is archive, which is more than 30 days. So you can archive the data and you can keep it for longer than that. It just becomes a question of how do you want to architect it? Do you want to do that for all of your systems, some of your systems? So that's why I was, there's a couple different ways to answer it, but the short answer is yes.
Yeah, naturally, we have the cloud-based offerings for it to assist with that, for that longer-term retention, and can help you architect a solution that is going to be appropriate for those needs that you have in terms of cost structure and things of that nature.
Okay, and we'll just answer a couple more here before flipping to the final slide. What is the major difference between regular backups and disaster recovery with Zerto? If an organization is tech savvy, can't they just restore their backup in the same time frame?
Good question. I think the answer becomes around the flexibility and also the appetite for downtime. And what I mean by that is, with Zerto, and the example I give is that it's 5 p.m. at night, it's the end of the business day, some outage happens, whatever it is, and you have to recover your data. From a traditional backup perspective, you're going back to last night's backup. So you're losing the entire day's worth of data. Could you do it as quick? I would be hard pressed to say, you probably couldn't be, but even if you can recover as quick, what I would say is that you've lost an entire day's worth of data versus seconds worth of data with the Zerto and Cox solution. And that to me is really different. I mean, it's downtime. The backups usually don't have an automation perspective to it, meaning you're recovering data, you're putting it back in place. That's just recovering data. What if you had a real outage and you no longer have that server anymore? You no longer have that network switch anymore. Then you're talking IP changes and DNS changes and things like that are much more DR centric, which Cox can help you with and Zerto can be involved with as well.
Great, and we'll wrap up with this one. A couple people are wondering if there's any hardline qualifications in order to get DR, if there are some minimum specs.
I mean, from a Zerto perspective, our requirement specifically for Zerto is virtualization. That's our real one requirement. Other than that, we don't really have one. And from a Cox business standard, I know there's lots of different options and solutions that they can build. But really, I mean, we have customers who are protecting, and this is true, I have customers protecting 5 virtual machines that are going to another data center, and I have customers that are protecting 10,000 VMs. So we're we're really all about flexibility and options. So, Chris, I don't know if there's something specific on the Cox side you want to add.
I can't really think of anything that I would say in the sense of like a disqualification, so to speak, which that may be what part of that question would be.
Yeah.
Because, obviously we offer Zerto, which is an outstanding solution, but we offer other solutions that can assist in other areas where a company may, for example, decide, okay, I need to protect these 7 critical servers, which may have X number of VMs on them with Zerto, because these are my critical business applications that I need to get back in, a high and fast time frame and then you may layer other solutions that we can help companies with that will be for the less business critical aspects of their IT environment. So it's I wouldn't say that off the top of my head we have anything disqualifying where, short of you using something like a stone tablet, where from an IT perspective, there's probably not anything that's going to be disqualifying for us being able to help you architect whatever is going to be the best solution for your unique business challenges.
Yep.
Wonderful. Then with that, if we can flip on to the final slide, Matt, and I will run through this since Bob wasn't able to rejoin. So I know a lot of folks were asking how can they get more information, some follow-up information after this session. If you know your Cox business representative, of course, connect with them directly. Otherwise, we have this link on the screen that will also be sent out in a follow-up email. We also have a new LinkedIn group called Cloud Q&A where you're free to just go post whatever questions and our experts will help get those answered for you. You will be receiving a follow-up email in about 30 minutes. And if you want to respond directly to that, if you don't know who your Cox business rep is, we can also communicate with you that way. And we are continuing the webinar series next month on September 23rd. Our next session is focused on SD-WAN with our partners from VeloCloud. So please join that one if you're interested in learning more about that. And with that, thank you so much for your help, Matt and Chris. Really appreciate your time today. And thank you everyone who joined. We hope you got some valuable information out of this and hope you have a stellar rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.